Today we are visiting the Harcourt Cemetery in central Victoria to visit the final resting place of a Scottish convict transported to Van Diemen's Land in 1838. Her name was Mary Bentley. Mary was born in Linlithgow in Scotland in 1814, and thanks to the wonderful researchers at the Female Convicts Research Centre in Hobart, Lucy Frost, Leslie Lasham, Brooke Nadine Taylor and B. Pollock, we know that she was residing at her mother's house in the market town of Dalkeith when she was precognosed, which is a term in Scottish law meaning to conduct a preliminary examination of a witness prior to a trial. So on December 17th, 1836, Mary, along with Thomas Wilson and Mary McIver, were reported for robbery at the Edinburgh High Court. Now, I believe the Marys may have been working as housemaids together. The trial was covered in the Scotsman in February of 1837, and the trio were accused of attacking and assaulting quarryman John Taylor on the road from Dalkeith to Musselburgh. They violently threw him to the ground and stole 5 shillings in silver, a knife, 8 yards of cotton cloth and a yard of moleskin. All 3 pleaded not guilty. John Taylor testified that he had met Thomas Wilson on the evening of December the 3rd when he asked him for directions to the home of a man named Hare. Instead, Wilson took him to a local pub where they had a gill of spirits and then were joined by Mary Bentley and Mary McIver. Still wanting to go to his friend's house, Taylor was misled by the trio. Wilson tripped him up and held him down, and Taylor called out to the women, and Mary Bentley shouted, "Kill him where he lies," with a Scottish accent, of course. She then cut away Taylor's pockets with a pair of scissors, and that's when they stole the 5 shillings, a knife, and he had 8 yards of cotton cloth and a yard of moleskin in his pockets. Now that's very unusual. Is that unusual? I'm not sure what that means, but apparently he's walking around with cloth and moleskin in his trousers. So John Taylor reported the robbery and Wilson was arrested with Taylor's knife and money, and the women were also apprehended and identified by Taylor. The jury found all 3 guilty. Wilson was sentenced to life transportation, Mary Bentley to 14 years and Mary McIver to 7 years. Both women cried upon hearing their sentences, but Wilson remained unmoved. Mary was transferred to Bridewell Prison to await transportation, and in September of 1837 she was put onto the Atwick, the same ship as 2 previous convict women who you might remember from previous videos, Judith McCoy and Mary Ann Axford. So it is interesting that the 3 women, and probably more, ended up on the goldfields in the same area. Mary's jail report recorded her as being of irregular habits and bad connections. Now, after doing a bit of research about what this exactly meant and finding nothing, I put it to the folk on the Convict Ancestry Australia Facebook group, and I got various responses, from hanging out all night with the criminal classes, keeping company with the wrong sort of people, possible prostitution and vagrancy. If anyone knows what it actually means, please comment below. It could be a mixture of all of those things. Now, it also recorded that Mary had been on the town for 12 months, and according to Dr. Rebecca Kippen and Professor Janet McColman from the University of Melbourne, on the town had the general meaning of prostitution, but more broadly meant that these were women without a family and without a household. The fact that Mary lived with her mother makes me think in her case, on the town meant working as a prostitute. At least for the 12 months prior to her conviction anyway. Now, Rebecca and Janet's research found some interesting results about convict women who had been on the town. Using the convict records and a variety of other historical sources, they traced a sample of 6,000 convict women from transportation through their life course, under sentence and after emancipation. Controlling for other variables, we find that under sentence women who had been on the town had more conduct offences, more alcohol-related offences, and were more likely to react against the system with bad language, threats or violence. Well, who could blame them, really? On the town, women were just as likely as other female convicts to marry after transportation, and that's likely due to there were less women in the colony, but they were less likely to have children, which is interesting, and I wonder if that's due to disease. I'm not sure. They also had significantly higher mortality than other female convicts, who in turn had higher mortality than both free settler and locally born women. I've put Mary's convict description into the Find My Ancestor ChatGPT, and this is the image it's given me. Now, I am fortunate enough to have a photograph of Mary in her later years, but as it's from a private tree on Ancestry, it's not ethical to publish it, unfortunately. And here I've asked ChatGPT to give me an image of an older Mary when she was in her 80s and living on the goldfields in Victoria. So the Outwick arrived in Van Diemen's Land in January of 1838, and Mary was assigned to a Mr. B.R. Watson and sent northeast of Hobart to a place called Sorrel. It is interesting to note that Mary had only one offence against her name during her assignment, particularly as she had been described as having irregular habits and bad connections. She was put into solitary confinement for 3 days at the female factory in Hobart in August for neglect of duty and disorderly conduct. It was during the first year of her sentence that she met William Peeler. William, a fellow convict, had been transported for 14 years for larceny. He arrived in Van Diemen's Land on the ship Woodward in 1828. Now, William was a cotton card stripper in a mill, and his father was a shoemaker. And William was assigned to the survey department, so he was probably working on a public works project near Sorrel, which enabled the two to meet. William received his conditional pardon in October of 1838, and then he applied to marry Mary in December of the same year. The marriage was approved, and the couple married at St. David's Church in Hobart in May of 1839. Now, Mary was still in servitude at the Watsons, and I believe remained there until she gave birth to their first child, a son named Charles. It was here that she was assigned to the nursery at the female factory in Hobart. According to the Female Convicts Research Centre in Hobart, the convict nurseries, and there were 11 of them, were where the children of female convicts were held until they were 2 or 3 years old. The convicts lived with the children until they were weaned. And there was a high infant mortality rate at these nurseries, attributed in many cases to their unhealthy conditions. There was an inquest into the death of one child, and from that inquest the jury, having inspected the nurseries, were horrified at the conditions. An article in the Hobart Town Courier in March of 1838 reported the following. The jury put in a request to His Excellency Sir John Franklin that something be done about it. They were concerned that there was no place where the children could take exercise of any sort except a wet, flagged yard. To which, in evidence on oath of the Assistant Superintendent of the prison and other witnesses, for 4 months of the year, the sun's rays never penetrated, and during which period it is never otherwise than in a wet state. The jury have further to represent to His Excellency the close and confined state of the children's wards, 2 small rooms, each about 28 feet by 12, in which there are at present upwards of 70 human beings confined, and in the weaning room, 35. Oh gosh, the effluvia, from which even in the daytime, I'm assuming that's the smell, from which even in the daytime the jury found most offensive and must be most injurious, oh my gosh, these words, to the infants confined there. So it's, yeah, unhealthy. It smells, it's disgusting, it's unhealthy. It says particularly at night. The jury further submit to His Excellency that having been permitted to inspect the prison, although the coroner objected to their going into any evidence not immediately connected with the death of Barbara Herrings, obviously the little child that had died, they have respectively to represent to His Excellency the extremely offensive condition of the dark cells in which the jury found women closely confined upon bread and water for periods of 7 days to 1 month. So this jury has obviously gone in, seen the state of the nurseries, but also witnessed the cells where women were put in solitary confinement as punishment and put on bread and water, and they were horrified. The jury further submit to His Excellency that the amount of food supplied to the women is extremely limited. In one of the working wards, the women receiving no food whatever from 12 o'clock in the daytime to 8 o'clock of the morning of the next day. So imagine that. They'd had lunch, but they were not able to have anything else until 8 a.m. the next day. That's just terrible. So the jury further represent to His Excellency that no exclusive register of deaths is regularly kept in this prison, that it appears by the books of the medical attendant that 20 deaths have taken place since the 1st of January last, and it is in evidence before the jury that 2 have taken place within the last 14 days, and that inquests have not been held. So, I mean, what was really going on? What was happening? It sounded like a horror show. And so all which the jury respectfully submit to the consideration of His Excellency Sir John Franklin. So unfortunately for poor Mary, her firstborn Charles died of dropsy when he was 1 year old in 1840, and no wonder, those conditions were terrible. That same year, Mary gave birth to a daughter, Ellen, who survived. Another son was born in 1843, and in 1844, Mary received an indulgence and an early ticket of leave. And the record states, having served 7 of a 14-year sentence with very good conduct and being a married woman, has never applied for a ticket of leave. I have no doubt Mary was relieved to finally be removed from the nursery at the female factory and to move in with William. And by now William had received a pardon and was probably working as a labourer nearby to support his family. Mary gained a conditional pardon in 1848 and was officially free by servitude in February of 1851, just in time for gold to be found in Victoria. Mary, now a mother of 4 living children, moved with William to Castlemaine, where gold had been found at the Mount Alexander diggings. William began work as a miner, and Mary gave birth to 2 more children. The Peeler family then moved to nearby Barker's Creek, just outside of Castlemaine, where William worked as a miner for the rest of his life. They remained there until their deaths. William died on the 16th of June 1888, and 8 years later Mary died on the 29th of December 1896 of old age and debility. Unfortunately, I was unable to find Mary or William's graves at the Harcourt Cemetery. Now, just here, I did actually find some of their descendants' graves. I think it's a son William and a grandson William and their wives. So William and Mary Ellen Peeler, and I think there's a William Peeler and an Ellen Sarah Peeler. So I'm assuming, yeah, they're descendants. Well, I know that they're descendants of the actual Peelers. So I'm assuming William is buried actually right near them, because William is actually buried in the Methodist section in grave 94, and nothing was numbered. There was no maps. I couldn't find anything, so I'm assuming William's buried near there. Now Mary is actually buried in the Wesleyan section of the cemetery in grave number 130, and I couldn't find that either, so I've just gone the closest I could, and I've put some flowers there in memory of Mary. I may not have found Mary's grave or William's, but I did find something exciting. I found their descendants' family orchard shop and the property the family grew, or one of the sons had an orchard on, and this is it here. So I'm wondering, did Mary and William live here on this property? It's a beautiful part of the world, and it's right near Harcourt in central Victoria. And I also found out something exciting about one of Mary's grandsons, and he won a VC, a Victorian Cross, in World War One for heroism on the battlefield. And you can read about Walter Peeler's story on Trove. It's a Bendigo Advertiser article, I think from 1917, December 1917, yes. So we remember Mary and William Peeler and their simple but extraordinary lives as part of our unique convict history.